Good morning. My name is Andrea Coate, and I serve as the Director of Religious Education here at the Unitarian Universalist Society of Amherst. I use he, him pronouns. I'm going to take my mask off. Welcome to you, old friends and new, young and old, in the Zoom and in the sanctuary. You are an essential part of our celebration today. Whether today is your first or your 1000th Sunday in our midst, we are stronger because you are with us. We are one people of many beliefs, many origins, sexualities, and genders. We are all growing, all learning, all loved. Just as you are welcome here. Today we will be talking about small joys and simple gifts. I invite you into the small joy that you don't have to hold a piece of paper. What I'm saying is I forgot to print the orders of worship. You're welcome. Today there will also be a time for spoken joys and sorrows. Don't believe we have any families present. It is April vacation week, and so many people were off that we are not having any childcare or classes today. If someone does come in, there are some coloring sheets and toys in the back, and downstairs the service is streaming. You may notice that I take my mask off to speak and then put it back on again to sing. Any of our worship leaders who do unmask this morning have taken a COVID test. Our congregation has made the choice to prioritize the vulnerable rather than the comfortable with our masking policy. It is part of how we take care of one another.
Good morning. My name is Emma Livingston. I'm a member of the UUSA. I call us to worship with these words from Margaret Wise. Come into this place with your whole self, the parts that are raw and exposed, the part that is beaming with joy, the part that is seeking the truth, the new, the possibility. Come into this place. Open your heart. Lay down your burden. Lift up your hope for something new to happen. Come into this place with fellow travelers on the journey. Some faces new and others familiar, and all welcoming you here, now, to this moment. Come, let us worship together.
I invite you to join in the chalice lighting words with me on the screen above. We light this flame to invite a world of peace where we heal the wounds, where we share what we have with one another, where justice is another word for relationship, and we listen for what love has to say. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in our first hymn this morning, Now Let Us Sing. It is number 368 in your gray hymnal, and the words will also be on the screen.
Sing to the power of the
Our first reading this morning is by Nias Nin. Over and over again, I sail toward joy, which is never in the room with me, but always near me, across the way, like those rooms full of gaiety that one sees from the street, or the gaiety in the street one sees from a window. Will I ever reach joy? It hides behind the turning merry-go-round of the traveling circus. As soon as I approach it, it is no longer joy. Joy is a foam, an illumination. I am poorer and hungrier for the want of it. When I am in the dance, joy is outside in the elusive garden. When I am in the garden, I hear joy exploding from the house. When I am traveling, joy settles like an aurora borealis over the land that I leave. When I stand on the shore, I see it bloom on the flag of a departing ship. What is joy? Have I not possessed it? I want the joy of simple colors, street organs, ribbons, flags, not a joy that takes my breath away and throws me into space alone where no one can breathe with me. Not the joy that comes from a lonely drunkenness. There are so many joys, but I have only known the ones that come like a miracle, touching everything with light.
Our second reading is from Wendell Berry. There is not only peacefulness, there is joy. And the joy, less deniable in its evidence than the peacefulness, is the confirmation of it. I sat one summer evening and watched a great blue heron make his descent from the top of the hill into the valley. He came down at a measured, deliberate pace, stately as always, like a dignitary going down a stair. And then, at a point I judged to be midway over the river, without at all varying his wing beat, he did a backward turn in the air, a loop-the-loop. It could only have been a gesture of pure exuberance, of joy, a speaking of his sense of the evening, the day's fulfillment, his descent homeward. He made just that one slow turn, and then flew on out of sight in the direction of the slough farther down in the bottom. The movement was incredibly beautiful, at once exultant and stately, a benediction on the evening and of the river and on me. It seemed so perfectly to confirm the presence of a free, non-human joy in the world.
So I've mentioned before, I'm from Los Angeles. And growing up, the difference in the seasons was so minute that it was almost imperceptible. Now, the temperature did change, but everything looked pretty much the same at any given time. The main street that everything was off of was lined in palm trees. So a few other trees would get a little orangey, and some leaves would fall. But palm trees are not known for their startling fall foliage. Sometimes you would see teenagers in perhaps a completely unnecessary hoodie in the winter. The temperatures would sometimes dip into the high 40s overnight before springing back up to the high 60s or low 70s during the day in January. And so when I moved to New England, I had to recalibrate my own body on what different weather meant. I could not use up all of my winter clothes in the frigid temperatures of mid-September if I was going to make it to live to see February. And I have mostly come to enjoy the seasons now. Like most people in New England, I'm a little done with the weather when we reach mid-March, and I can complain about the black flies with the best of them come summer. But so much of those inconveniences are overcome the first time I can walk outside on a truly warm day and not feel even a hint of winter wind. When the air on my skin is purely warm, that is one of the simplest, best joys in the world to me. A joy I never knew I was missing until I moved here. We said goodbye to our snow this week. I know that some of you believe I am now cursing us to a late April snowstorm with that comment, but mentally, I have said goodbye to my snow. Here is a picture I took of the last bit of our snow that a month ago up in West Hampton was up to my waist in many places. The joy of taking this picture. It seems so silly, but it was enough to just know that once again I could stand outside and be warm. That was joy for me in the moment. I have been thinking a lot about the concept of enough lately. What is it to have enough? Now, I do want to caveat this, that many people do not have enough. If you are a person for whom there is simply not enough money or freedom or housing or time with family or health care or any other number of things, it is hard to experience joy. I have had times in my life where I definitely did not have enough, and I was not in a space of taking joy in simple things. Asking people who are truly suffering to take joy in the little things when society is failing them is, to be polite, not a kind thing to do. However, if you do have enough, if you have money or time or generational privilege or any combination thereof, I encourage you too to think of what it means to have enough. Saying goodbye to our snow, welcoming warm spring wind, the damp earth the coming summer, watching my youngest kid learn to actually play in a sandbox rather than sit there confused by it, seeing my oldest dashing around on her two-wheeler bike with no training wheels that she finally conquered this fall. When I have to run out to our minivan after bedtime to search for a missing water bottle and I catch the best view of a starry sky, it doesn't need to be anything over the top. Those are enough to bring joy. The fourth section of I Sing the Body Electric by Walt Whitman reads, I have perceived that to be with those I like is enough. To stop in company with the rest at evening is enough. To be surrounded by beautiful, curious, breathing, laughing flesh is enough. To pass among them or touch anyone or rest my arm ever so lightly round his or her neck for a moment. What is this then? I do not ask any more delight. I swim in it as in a sea. There is something in staying close to men and women and looking on them, and in the contact and odor of them that pleases the soul well. All things please the soul, but these please the soul well. The joy of seeing the sun return, the days grow lighter, is a joy that Whitman would say is enough. It doesn't need to be a big joy, the joy of vacation that you've waited a lifetime to take, a first grandchild being born, winning the lottery. Those two are obviously joys, great joys. Those are life-changing joys. But it's turning what may seem mundane into enough, and turning that enough into joy that is capturing my attention. When I was in seminary, I had one professor who was obsessed with the Desert Fathers. I'm curious if anyone here knows of the Desert Fathers. One. For the uninitiated, the Desert Fathers were these third century Christian monks who fled civilization to live a life of isolation and strict asceticism in the Skeet Desert of Egypt. And there were also definitely women in much smaller numbers because of patriarchy, but they are collectively referred to usually as the Desert Fathers. So these Desert Fathers were not an abundantly joyful crowd. They were a group of people who chose to go live in the Skeet Desert in the 3rd century in isolation. They recited scripture, and they prayed without ceasing. They did not talk a lot about joy, but they did talk a lot about enough. Now, they didn't write down their own wisdom. Everything we know of the Desert Fathers comes from these collections of their wisdom stories, most of which are very short, like a sentence or two, sometimes a short paragraph. And like I said, these are not original writings. These were orally passed from monk to monk, first in Coptic, and then finally written down in Greek in the 5th century. And each of them begins with Abba blank said, or Amma something said. And so here is an example of a saying of a Desert Father. Abba Euprepius said, bodily things are compounded of matter. He who loves the world loves occasions of falling. Therefore, if we happen to lose something, we must accept this with joy and gratitude, realizing that we have been set free from care. Now, that really is about as joyful as they tend to get. They were ascetic monks. They were not given to overabundant joy. Another quote from Euprepius reads, eat straw, wear straw, sleep on straw, that is to say, despise everything and acquire yourself a heart of iron. So the one about acceptance of loss is actually pretty ecstatic. People around the world have been trying to find joy in simplicity for as long as we have records of human history. There are those Desert Fathers. Thoreau, we all know his mother did his laundry, still. Marie Kondo, who wants to know if your old ice skates spark joy. And yes, we all know that she gave up after she had children. There is a Facebook group that my partner joined called the Minimalist Mama. And I swear this group wants you to give your children things like a single wooden block and a piece of organic yarn for their birthday so they can truly use their imaginations. People often wax poetic about when times were simpler. People yearn for the joy that they imagine would come if we all had simpler lives. Now, to be clear, a lot of that is nostalgia for a past that never was. But I do think there is something to be said for slowing down and appreciating the little things in life. I want to share a piece from Annie Dillard. It's a little bit long, but it's one of my favorites. When I was 6 or 7 years old, growing up in Pittsburgh, I used to take a precious penny of my own and hide it for someone else to find. It was a curious compulsion. Sadly, I've never been seized by it since. For some reason, I always hid the penny along the same stretch of sidewalk up the street. I would cradle it at the roots of a sycamore or in a hole left by a chipped off piece of concrete. And then I would take a piece of chalk and, starting at either end of the block, draw huge arrows leading up to the penny from both directions. After I learned to write, I labeled the arrows "surprise ahead" or "money this way." I was greatly excited during all of this arrow drawing at the thought of the first lucky passer who would receive in this way, regardless of merit, a free gift from the universe. But I never looked about. I would go straight home and not give the matter another thought until some months later I would be gripped again by the impulse to hide another penny. The world is fairly studded and strewn with pennies cast broadside from a generous hand. But, and this is the point, who gets excited by a mere penny? It is dire poverty indeed when one is so malnourished and fatigued that he won't stoop to pick up a penny. But if you cultivate a healthy poverty and simplicity so that finding a penny will literally make your day, then, since the world is in fact planted in pennies, you have, with your poverty, bought a lifetime of days. It is that simple. I am not saying that I particularly enjoy the fact that in the dead of winter, the sun sets at 4:22 p.m., or that for the next 3 months, I will at some point each day be uncomfortably cold because I am unwilling to wear socks in bed. However, I am continuing to practice what it means to lean into that joy of the first warm day or the first big snowstorm of the year when I don't have to go anywhere, of watching the sunrise each morning from our deck, driving home via the back roads because there's less construction and the view is better. As an aside, I am confused how Hadley, Massachusetts is continuously under construction. These enough joys are so much easier to attain, so much simpler than the next big thing. So I would like to encourage you to turn to someone near you or turn into yourself and think or talk for a moment about what your next big joys are, that are those little things that we're looking for. I'm serious, talk to each other. I'll keep the time. I call you back into your seats. Before I end this morning, I would like to take you back to those desert fathers, those monks in the Skeet Desert. You may have heard of the monks of New Skeet. Has anyone heard of the monks of New Skeet? Hi, John. This was actually a complete revelation to me as I was writing, despite that I knew of the desert monks, the desert fathers in Skeet, and the monks of New Skeet. They are this collective of modern ascetic communities who take some of their inspiration from those desert fathers. As an aside, they also have this huge business of dog training, which is what most of their website is about, and I'm completely unclear of the connection. But they wrote a book a number of years ago called In the Spirit of Happiness. And I'd like to leave you with the wisdom of these more joyful modern-day monks. Life never seems to prepare us sufficiently for epiphanies. By definition, they come upon us suddenly, dazzling us by their raw power. They are not magical intrusions from another world, but reality, naked and without shame. Their very ordinariness shimmers with unexpected depth, which is why they take us by such surprise. It doesn't matter whether they occur in the majesty of Hagia Sophia or in the elegant simplicity of a wooden chapel. The effect is the same. I invite you to rise in body or spirit to join in our next hymn this morning, "'Tis a Gift to be Simple," number 16 in your gray hymnal.
My name is Rob Footerich, and I'm a member of the pastoral care team. Each of us carries joys and are lifted by joys along the path of life. We honor these joys and sorrows in community by speaking them aloud to one another and by holding them in silence in our hearts. Come into this time of compassion and open your hearts.
We know that our financial contributions to this congregation come from sacrifice and hard work. We are so grateful for this and commit together to ensure that the funds we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and the world than could be done alone. Our dedicated offering for April is the Sojourner Truth School for Social Change Leadership, which is affiliated and financially sponsored by the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, D.C. Also known as the Truth School, it offers classes to individuals and groups with the goal of promoting and facilitating the skills required to build a movement. As always, checks can be made to UUSA with plate/dedicated offering in the memo line or online via Breeze. We thank you for your generous support. May this offering sustain and grow the life and mission of this congregation and our dedicated offering organizations. May we give in love and in hope. I invite you to join in the words, of extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.